where are most people rich? What makes most people rich? So I kind of go to the data. I came from really middle class, we didn't have money all the time. I remember what it was like to not have money. I remember what it was like when my debit card, I was a little worried stuff wouldn't go through at the grocery store. And I didn't like that feeling. And so I kind of started looking around and I was like, wait a second, where do people have money? And after being in finance for whatever it is, 15 years, I'm going to give away my age, I realized people that have money have one thing: ownership. So the data is really clear on this. 70% of millionaires are self-made, which is interesting. I used to think maybe you just inherit it. Did they just get lucky? And then 68% of millionaires have some form of ownership. They have actually bought a business or have equity in a business or built a business. And so when I realized that, I was like, the problem is I don't have a brilliant idea. Like, I don't know how to make money. I don't have any money to make money. But at least you have step one, which is if you don't have ownership, you're probably never going to be free financially. You got to get some skin in the game. That doesn't mean that you have to become an entrepreneur. It's really hard to do that. It sucks many days. You know this very well. There's Fridays when you're never going to make payroll, and that is like a deep, terrible, dark hurt, actually. But if you realize ownership is the name of the game, then you should probably obsess on one thing more than anything else, which is learn the language of money. And back when I was young, I was a journalist originally, made $0. And I realized that I had no idea why I had opportunities and ability to make some money. And let's say the women I was covering at the time in Juarez, they call it La Ciudad de Muerte, right? The city of death, which is where women are mutilated and raped and brutalized and found murdered all over the city every single day, thousands of women a year. There were many that had the last name Sanchez. My last name happens to be Sanchez. I was like, what's the difference between us? Is it that I'm American? No, that's not it alone. I think it's also that I had some financial tools, and like money is a pushback against other people's architecture of your life. And it makes people care about you one way or the other, which is sad. But the truth of the matter is, if you are poor, you have no power. And anybody who's been poor before knows that is true. You got to go where the game is played. So the first thing I tell you is if you don't have any cash, you need to find a way to figure out how to speak the language of money. And that probably means you maybe go work in finance like I did. You get with a company that has smart leaders like Jay, where you can actually go and learn from them. And you obsess on, can I become fluent in the thing that nobody talks about in the US, because money is supposed to be the root of all evil.
Yeah. What are some of the mistakes that you think we think about what makes money? Like what are we thinking makes money right now, where we're being distracted, where actually small businesses is where you're pointing the spotlight?
Yeah.
But what are we distracted by?
I think a lot of young people today chase the shiny object, right? And think about this for a second. I remember like many years ago, I had an opportunity to invest in Robinhood, and I could kick myself financially because I didn't. But at the time, why I didn't is I was like, day trading stocks as amateurs and then gamifying it so we get like adrenal response every time a balloon pops because we placed a trade might be a bad idea. Like, I don't think we should probably gamify our finances that way. And I think that's what's happened to young people. They're being told, put it in the stock market and day trade. They're being told NFTs and playing with crypto monkeys. They're being told price speculation on crypto or even Bitcoin. They're taking margin calls out on their stock portfolios. And with the little amount of money that they have, they're trying for this get rich scheme speculation. And the shitty part is that just never works. You know, the one sure thing I know about money is that you're never going to make it if your solution is, hey, I'm going to win at money because that guy's going to lose. If you think that there is a lose-win scenario and you are the one that's going to win, I hate to tell you, you're the one holding the bag.
Well said.
Yeah. And I wish people told us that more, that actually making money doesn't have to be lose-win. It could be win-win. And that is when you know you've actually found a good opportunity, is when you go, okay, why would I make money on this deal? Oh, because I am solving a pain point that adds value to another human's life, and I've properly valued what my own skill set is. The problem is most of us don't even know what we're good at or how you'd value that skill. And we could play around with some exercises so that any human could figure out, okay, I, Cody, know how to market something. How do I figure out how much that is worth, and how could I transfer some of that to get a percentage of equity in somebody's company just for the skill that I have? And the last thing I want to say there is like, more than anything, I think one, we think money's bad. And then two, money's scary. Like, I don't really know why, but I think we're scared of it. And we're scared that we might not be able to make it. And we're scared, what if we lose it? And what if our self-worth is tied up in it? And should we actually ask for it? So we have all these fears surrounding money, which is probably why we don't talk about it too. And we got to kind of work through that, because money is just a tool. So it's just like, if you want to build a house, do you want to use, a bunch of tiny little nails and your own hammer, or do you want to have a screw gun? And like in this instance, I want to have the bigger gun.
I want to look at 3 scenarios of our audience and where they sit, and look at what your advice would be for them at that point. So let's say we have a listener who just graduated from college. What should they be doing first? What should they be thinking about right now?
Yeah. Well, here's how I think about making money. We have a 4-step process that I think, if you don't have money now, here is how you make it consistently over time, and you have your money go out and bring back friends with it. The first is, you've got to learn. We've got to obsess in the beginning about one thing only. It's not what your salary is. It's how can I cram as much information as humanly possible in my brain in order for me to then do the next thing, which is increase my skill stack. After I learn, can I increase my skills so that my skills are more valuable today than they were yesterday? And the third is, how can I increase my income? So before you go thinking about investing in things overall, how can I just make more money currently with what I'm doing? And then finally, we can get to invest. So after we do these 3 steps, the final one is, how do I take my money and make my money work for me? But in the beginning, you don't have money. You don't really have skills. You probably don't have a ton of connections. And so what you actually want to do is use your sweat equity and your experience and time as a really maybe hungry individual to get money to eventually be able to invest the money. And I think that's the other thing young people are told that's a lie, is that you can go out as a young person and, Fendi, Gucci, Prada, Lamborghini on the internet, make a bunch of fast cash and Airbnb arbitrage or whatever. Man, I wish somebody had told me earlier on that's a terrible thing to do. I want people to think about is like, I want to make risk a non-4-letter word, because I think that the key to wealth is actually risk, taking some of it. The question is, if you're like me, I'm kind of a wuss. Like, I stayed in a corporate job for 12 years because I was too scared to do things by myself. Even though I was like pretty highly skilled, I had a decent amount of cash. I was like, definitely not going to make it. I don't think I'm capable. Like, it took me a long time to get there. And so what I did is, I'm all about risk mitigation, which is like a fancy, financy word to say, how can I just make the outcome so in my favor that even if I'm not as smart as I think I am, it's almost like a win-win no matter what. And so in that instance, I would probably say, make the founder a deal so good that they would feel dumb saying no to it. And so if I was coming to you, Jay, and Jay was just starting out, I wouldn't do this to somebody who has a big platform. They have too many resources. You need to go with somebody that's more accessible to you, that doesn't have a lot of resources, that's more on your level. But when you find that person, you go, hey, win-win deal. Don't give me a cent unless I provide X value, like literally nothing. Don't give me a percentage of the company right away. I never give a percentage of my companies right away anymore. I did once, it cost me $1 million. I was pissed. I didn't do it again. So you can do what's called an earn-in or milestone-based deliverables, which I know sounds like a little maybe boring if people are listening to this.
It's the right way to do it. I'm so glad you're giving this advice. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, what you want to do is say, hey, I love you. You love me. We're going to be together forever. In the off chance that you see a hot little side piece and you run off with them, I want an ability to get the business back, right? And so in that way, I am going to instead say, hey, I'm taking all the risk in this business for the most part. I'm putting in the capital. Unless you're going to put in money that is equal to me, you only get the equity in the business or the upside in the business if it's either duration or it's execution. So either you're here for 1, 2, 3 years, which is called cliff-based investing, or you're here for the first $1 million that you helped me get in, and then the second $1 million, and the third $1 million. And if you help me hit those milestones, you get the equity. If you don't, I wish you well, you wish me well, but we've already signed a prenup, and this is how it works. And so I think we need to start thinking like that. And it's very non-American. We're not so used to negotiating. Probably non-British too. Actually, Indians, incredible at negotiation. Same with a lot of people in the Middle East. But British and American people, not so good at negotiating. We think that it's like a low-level signal on average. So like when I was young, my mom, we call her the Pipple. She's amazing. And she would always negotiate everything. My dad's an incredible businessman, like totally pulled himself up by his own bootstraps, but my mom would go negotiate. And I don't know if you ever felt like this, but I remember sometimes, my mom would be like negotiating for a different price. I'd be like, Mom.
Oh, all
Mom,
the time.
Like,
all
please
the time.
stop. You just pay it. And she would look at me and she would say like, once it's your money, you pay it, but it's my money. So like, get out of here if you don't want to deal with this. And I used to think it was so embarrassing. And now I realize, oh, that's very smart. And it's actually the thing the wealthy do more than anything else that the poor do not, which is the wealthy negotiate everything and the poor take price while the rich set price.
Wow, I've never thought about it like that. Set price versus taking a price.
If your representation of money that you feel in your body is closed off, kind of scared, whatever, I don't know, might be hard for you to earn it. So I think for some reason, being in finance helped me realize, hey, you guys, if you met some of the guys who were worth $100 million that I did in finance, you'd go, I could do that too. Like that guy did it? Really? And so I think once you meet a bunch of those people, you go, oh, like this isn't as impossible as people say it is. And so I learn a lot from not seeing people achieve it and going, how could they? How could they? It's instead going, wow, that guy didn't want to think if he could do it, I could do it too. And that taught me to keep going, okay, he did it. And it's like arms would raise, arms would raise, arms would raise. And so maybe that's what I would try to tell people is like every time you see somebody that has a lot of money and you see the humanity in them, just remember like we're all kind of the same.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can, now don't get me wrong, intelligence levels, network, how you're born, where you're born, real things. But if you're living in a first world country, in today's day and age, with the internet and what we have at our fingertips, I think you're in a better position than you've ever been in order to make a lot of money today. And I promise you only one thing, which is you'll make less money if you think you will. Maybe if I gave one other piece of advice on mentorship, it would be collect and keep with you the people even after you've superseded them.
That's beautiful advice. Yeah.
And try to be their best mentor.
Absolutely.
Mentee. I always try to like have them, I want them to be able to brag about me.
Yeah.
Like no matter what you teach me, I want to be the best mentee to the point that they're like, hey, look how smart I am because of that.
Yes.
And I want to give them all the credit on it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, then they introduce you to their really successful friends too. So it's a twofer.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to add what you were saying earlier as well, this idea of you have to act on the advice. And I think there's a lot of requesting of advice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of looking for answers. But being a great mentee is taking the advice, putting it into action, and then reporting the result and saying, hey, I took your advice. This is, as you were saying. And I think that's so core to what was different about mentorship, where like you're saying now in this TikTok, Instagram world, I think there's just so much advice everywhere that we're not really getting the opportunity to digest it, put it into practice, and then report on it as well. And I love your idea of gratitude. I mean, I remember when I joined a company as an intern years ago, and I was only there for like a summer internship, but they put up the pictures of the founders of the company. And then they were like, yeah, but we don't care about them. They're old guys anyway. And I remember I was just like, wow, that's really ungrateful.
Yep.
Because none of us would be here right now if it wasn't for them. And yes, they're not alive anymore. And yes, that was a long time ago. But I fully agree with you that, and also you just don't know when you're on the way up, when you're on the way down. Your mentors generally, if they're older than you in the beginning, even if you become more successful than them materially, I believe they have so much more spiritual wisdom to give you over time. Like I've got mentors, same way, who helped me out when I was in my late 20s. And today, they're so much more helpful when they talk to me about what it feels like being a dad. Like I'm not a dad right now, but he's been a dad and his kids are in their mid-20s and he has a great relationship with them. I'm like, I'm not there at that level. So mentorship also takes across not just financial, but relationships, emotionally, mentally. There's so many other areas.
Oh, yeah.
So leaving someone behind is terrible advice.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And, it's one thing if somebody's negative or they're unhelpful, which I still believe very much so, like Arthur Brooks, who I just think so highly of. And I remember back before I knew him as a friend and I was just a fan. Last time I was in New York with him, I was having like, when somebody's mean to you online, does that ever happen to you? Probably sometimes.
Yeah, all the time.
Of course. Well, there was one person that was like really mean and I don't know why. It got to me somehow. It bothered me. And this was a while ago, and I remember telling him for some reason. And often it only bothers me if I feel like there's a kernel of truth to it. So if they like really nail my imposter syndrome, or they really nail like, is she as smart as she thinks she is? Like something that I'm like, that I worry about too. If they get that, I'm like, dang it, I'm paying attention now. That's not good. But I remember I said to him like, I'm just bothered and I want to do something about it. And he was like, are you going to listen to me? And I was like, maybe. What are you going to tell me to do? And he's like, I want you to picture this guy having all the success in the world. I want you to wish him so much well, it becomes like a bit bizarre. And I want you to actually feel it. And again, I'm not that touchy-feely. I'm pretty spreadsheety. So when he told me that, I'm like, fine. But like, I don't think there's going to be an outcome here like that. And he's a wonky, very smart guy. So it's not. Anyway, so I did it and I like really thought about it. I was like walking in New York and I was like, you know what? I do wish this guy well, because I bet it is sad if you're in a place where all you're doing is hating on somebody online all the time. I bet you are kind of sad. So I started like empathizing with him and thinking about it. Anyway, not 2 weeks later, the guy does a public apology for like, no, and does this long DM to me. My husband has like a long memory. So he's like, no, let's get that guy. But I was like, I just learned such a lesson. And maybe it doesn't always work like that. And maybe they're still mean to you later. But I really think sometimes you learn just as much from your haters as you do from your mentors. And so don't underestimate not only the saying where we kind of get all hot and bothered, like, if you don't got hate, you're not doing anything, maybe, but also, wow, you can learn a lot from the type of feelings you get when people doubt you. And I think that's just as important. And I wouldn't be where I was today if I didn't have some big haters that I felt like I needed to prove wrong.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
I want to dive into the heart of this book, because what made it so unique for me is I don't think I've ever heard anyone really talk about buying ordinary businesses. And that's the crux of so much of your work and why it's different and how you're getting people to think differently about ownership. You had this video that I remember watching that got like 11 million views talking about this vending machine business. Like, what are some of the most unusual businesses you've seen people make money from? Because I think it goes back to what we were speaking about earlier. We're all after this sexy, shiny money. And most people are making loads of money through really unsexy, random things, vending machines being a case in point. Walk us through some of the most unusual businesses you've discovered people making money
Yes, let's do it. And also realize first, like most of the people who are really shiny on the internet don't actually make much money. In fact, a lot of celebrities make no money. And you know this all too well being here. There's a lot of show, and it's actually quite hard to make money in the shiny things. The richest guy probably started a landscaping or sprinkler head company. In fact, that was the case for my family. When I was growing up, I interned for a woman who was my brother's friend's mom. And they were worth what I thought was $1 bajillion back then. And it was from an equipment rental company. So this guy was worth somewhere near $50 million from one idea. I buy some like landscaping equipment, some tractors, etc. And I don't sell them, I don't flip them, but I realized that construction companies only want to use them part-time. So I actually rent them out. And so this guy would make the cost of a piece of equipment back inside of 90 days. And so instead of getting whatever difference is between him buying the equipment and selling it for a little bit more, he would make the entire purchase price over every 90-day cycle. And I remember like thinking back in the day when I saw that, you can make money doing anything. And in fact, you probably make it more often in the things that nobody thinks about because you have less competition, because it also sounds really boring.
Yeah.
And the Mark Zuckerbergs and brilliant minds of the world, they don't want to mess around with equipment rental. But people like me who are maybe like kind of smart, but not that smart, could make a lot of money doing it. And so there are 3 types of businesses that I obsess about. I call them overarchingly Main Street businesses. So the idea is basically, what if all the money is actually made in community businesses that we use every single day? Your roofing company, your podcast production company you send outsourced editing clips to, the cobbler that actually cleans up shoes on the corner store. All of these businesses, when you see that they've been in business for 30 years, it's not because they were making money or because they were losing money, and it's not because they got venture capital, because they didn't. So these things actually are profitable, which is kind of rare. So Main Street businesses, and then underneath it, I call them 3 different types. The first one is the gateway drug business, which basically I use that as a little bit of a joke, but it's like a vending machine. Well, everybody understands how a vending machine works, right? You get the machine, you take the cash out, you input the things. It's a straightforward business. It doesn't need a lot of people. And I think it's a great place for like young people to start because you learn the game of business. A similar one might be what I call a people light business, which might be like a laundromat. So a laundromat is like, in some ways, a slightly bigger vending machine, right? You put clothes in, the clothes get washed, you take the clothes out, you put coins in and return, right? And that doesn't have a lot of employees and they're not super, super expensive on the scale of it. And so you go, okay, we got gateway drug businesses, we've got people light businesses. And then finally, we get into what I call the trades businesses overall, or boring businesses. And these are things like we own a company called Resi Brands that has a window cleaning company called Pinks, a roofing company, a painting company called That One Painter. And what's wild is with these businesses, if you were to look right now, Jay, at like the Forbes 100 list of the richest people in the world, and you were to see what they made their money from, they're not celebrities. They're not singing songs. They're not doing YouTube. Like, we're not even touching the amount of wealth they have. What do most of them have in common more than anything else? Finance and business ownership. And the businesses they own are largely boring businesses. Richest woman in the world, Kim Kardashian? No. Roofing magnate. Literally the richest woman in the world. This was as of 2022, so we should see if the numbers are updated, but is a woman who started a very large roofing company. And so, you know, I wish somebody told us this when we were younger, because instead, you know who knows this? The private equity guys. And I don't mean to villainize anybody. I know I was in private equity. I know plenty of good people in that industry. But again, centralization of power. Private equity companies in 2000 owned 4% of the companies in the US. Now they own 20%. That's almost 1 out of every 4 companies in the US is owned by private equity. You know what they're buying like crazy? The trades, the service businesses, the boring businesses that print money, that service our community. And I think this is our chance to take those things back.
What skills and talents do people need to be able to run those businesses? How much industry knowledge do they need? What business skills are core and important? Because I think the mistake is, again, with the kind of world we live in right now, it's someone goes, oh, I love what Cody's saying. I get it. I'm going to go buy vending machines. And then all of a sudden you got a garage full of like 20 vending machines and you don't know what to do with them because you don't understand business. So what core business skills are needed and what should we be developing in order to run any of these businesses? How much industry knowledge do we need?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, what I would think about is there's 2 different things we need to know in buying businesses or growing businesses. And the first thing is you've got to learn how to do deal making and how to actually speak the language of money, which is what we talk about in the book, before you buy a business. So please don't just hear me and go buy a business. Read the book or go to our free newsletter online, but spend a decent amount of upfront time learning. I promise you'll make more money that way. You know, I kind of think about sometimes people go, well, why don't I use X amount of dollars I have instead of learning, just buying the business? And I go, does that ever work out well where we like don't know what we're doing, but we plow a bunch of money into it because we want to just go do the thing? It doesn't work out. So spend your time learning how to execute first. Now, that said, I really think there's just 3 key skills that we need to learn to grow a business. The first one is deal making. We got to understand how to do a deal. The second one is really the mixture of grit and endurance. So it's actually not tactics. It's how hard am I willing to work? What am I willing to sacrifice for the things that I want? And for how long am I willing to do that? And so Angela Duckworth, famously, University of Pennsylvania, popularized grit as the most important thing to measure success. So it's basically like, how much pain can you tolerate? And if you can tolerate a lot of pain, turns out you have a higher likelihood of making money. Business is really just like elongated periods of low-level pain. Sometimes you have like what's called an acute or like a big jump in pain. But for the most part, you know this. It's like, what is running a business or starting a business? It's like, well, you're looking at your statements pretty much often. You're like messing around with marketing. It's kind of like low-level pain. And so that's the second point. And the third point is actually maybe a little rare too, which is just a lot of people obsess on how. So what skills do I have to have exactly? How do I start a business? How do I tax structure the business? How do I get my first customers? All important and good questions. But the real pros know you don't ask how, you ask who. Who can I go to who already has 10,000 hours where I can steal their homework? So now in business, if I go, hey, I don't know how to do our taxes. I go find somebody else who has done taxes for us. And it doesn't mean you have to pay for them. It just means you have to talk to them, and often people will help you. And so I find my who second. And then the third tier is buy. So the really, really rich, when they have a problem, they don't think, how do I fix it? They don't think, who can fix it? They think, how do I buy the solution to my problem? Because if I can buy the business, if I can buy the solution, then it's a higher guarantee of winning. And so that last one is really about your connections. And so I think if you understand deal making, you are honest with yourself about how much work you're willing to do one way or the other, and you are willing to ask people for help, I think just about anybody can run a business. Now, can anybody run Amazon? No, of course not. Could anybody run your businesses, which are quite big? No, of course not. It's really like the level of skill to the level you're at. But we don't say to people, well, not anybody could buy an individual apartment and live in them. We ask, like, what do you want? And how are you willing to work in order to get it? And so I think the same thing with businesses. It's like, okay, we have what's called the deal box, which is a little slightly technical, but basically the idea is Oracle of Delphi says, know thyself, right? Most important thing we can do. And in business, you basically want to have your little deal box of what you want. So do you want income of X amount? Do you want it to be located in LA? Do you want it to scratch an artistic itch and make you money? And you sort of fill out this box, you know what you want. And then again, the universe, I think a lot of times wants to help us out, but we don't know what we want. So how is it going to help us? Because we can't tell it one way or the other. And I think it's the same with business.
Yeah.
Because we could go 15 ways from sideways on, like, we have something called the 9 Ps, which are like the 9 ways you scale a business to 9 figures. But I don't want to stop people. Yeah. I want them to start small and reasonable and know that the biggest thing in between you and the thing that you want is the knowledge on learning the language of money, on getting after it kind of intensely, and then on asking for help. And like, if you have those 3 things, you can at least start. And I don't want people to stop because they don't have XYZ leadership skill. Like, I believe in your ability to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you might make some mistakes along the way. You
probably will.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah, just don't make mistakes. Like, the only rule that I really have is don't do a deal so big that it can wipe you out.
Yeah.
Make sure your first deal is reasonable, or you help other people bring on risk to level it out. So like, if I'm young and I have no cash, should I go buy $1 million business? Of course not. What would I do? I might go and I might partner with a couple friends, and I might say, hey, do you want to pool our capital together? Let's buy this little business together. If it doesn't work out, it's not going to murder us. It's going to hurt, but we're going to learn a lot, and we're going to diversify our risk amongst us, and we're going to do it together. Yeah. Or maybe you partner with your dad, or maybe you partner with your dad's friends or your mom's friends or whatever. And so don't think that you have to do this game of entrepreneurship and acquisition by yourself. You don't. The big boys in private equity don't. You don't have to either.